everything but stats for the CCL because it's kind of true.
Oh boy. And how about you, Marco? What have you been doing except for everything?
Let's see here. Um, Obviously last year I had the role sort of as uh, designer, as we talked about last time I was on the podcast. I think this year behind the scenes, oh my gosh, it feels like everything right now from some more classified stuff can't talk about to uh, sort of the main role right now is making sure to delegate, like basically trafficking people from the amateur community or people just looking to get involved into collegiate to their respective colleges or clubs or gaming organizations, whatever the case. That's really what I've been doing on like the forefront of things. Um, and then on top of that, I'm assisting John with just about every project he's doing right now, however I can, and trying to activate on some other things, trying to yeah, trying to make sure we end up with a couple new things to go ahead and present to players next year. Just in the works of making things happen. Very much outreaching to people. That's probably what I'm doing hardcore right now, more than I am designing.
Fair enough. And I mean, there's more than enough roles to go around and enough responsibilities to go around, especially when your org is small enough that everyone has to wear a whole bunch of hats. So I'm glad to hear that everyone's taking on what they can to make this a more successful season coming up. But let's rewind back to season one and let's talk, what was season one like for you guys?
Honestly, season one started very hectic. At the start, there was essentially Marco, myself, and three other, higher level staff members that were like on the clock. Technically, we started out with season zero during Call of Duty World War II, which is the one prior to Black Ops 4, the one we played for season one. And that was only about 6 teams and lasted a couple of months. And then Black Ops 4 came out, and we basically tried to plan the entirety of season one in about a 2 month span because that's all the time we really had. We didn't really know exactly where season one was going to go and what was going to happen. So we basically just got down to the grind for a couple of months, making sure we planned everything out. And the start of season one was very hectic. We weren't exactly sure how many teams were going to sign up. Uh, there was a lot of interest from the community about college COD because at one point I believe AVGL had a college scene, and that only lasted for about half a season at the end of Black Ops 3. So almost 3 years ago at this point. And so like bringing it back for the community was like a very stressful time because the COD community is like very specific about who does what. Um, and so I'd say we were like nervous about what was going to happen with this season, but at the same time, very excited because we knew the potential it had.
And season one ended up rolling along, and uh, we were throwing new things out left and right. I think I remade schedules for season one like 4 times since we had pre-scheduled every single team. So I'm out here redoing graphics like 4 or 5 times to make sure everyone knows the right dates and such. We went as far as to having streams to announce divisions, uh, including sort of like the kickoff community event, which was known as Fight Night. Gosh, that's a story and a half. That was
Mm-hmm.
so stressful to make sure it got put on. That was a 7-day project. Seriously, as involved and as much production quality as is in it. Um, the fact that we pulled that off in 7 days from ground up is insane. And then of course, by the end of the season, uh, we had playoffs come around, and when playoffs came around, we had basically all eyes of the community on us. We had professional, people covering the professional community suddenly covering us. We had um, casters just in streams just casually walking. We had professional players in streams casually watching their friends play or curious on what was going on. We were getting hosted by professional players as they were seeing what was going on and were sort of supporting us. Uh, we we made Reddit a couple of times. I
Mm-hmm.
think 3 or 4. just between like, oh, this college league is doing this well. It's like, come check them out, or oh, you know, the playoffs are going on, and check out what teams are playing. And oh my gosh, it was an insanely stressful time, but I wouldn't trade any of it away.
It
It was
sounds
one
like that
heck of a
was
ride.
all the validation that you all needed to make sure that this is where you needed to be and where you needed to make sure it kept happening. Well,
Yeah, it sort of
yeah,
did.
yeah, because I mean, up to that point, like you weren't sure how many teams were going to be registering. You weren't sure how to do this stuff. You were just kind of thrown into it. You had 2 months to prep. You had then a week-long prep for that. So like your timelines were extremely small, but you had kind of that gut instinct of we had to be there. We had to be doing this for collegiate esports. We had to be doing this for Call of Duty, and everything just kind of lined up, and to see that support coming from professionals and Reddit catching on and everything, like that must have been like a huge feather in your cap and saying, yeah, we're going to stay here and we're going to keep doing this.
I think the one thing that really helps out is the entire CCL staff is a family. Like all of us are just super passionate about what we do, and it just helps so much. And knowing that people are going to do what they say they're going to do, it's going to be done to the highest quality that they can do. And just knowing that people are going to come through for you time and time again is probably the most relieving thing you could ever have in a space like this, where we were in such hectic timeline. Knowing everybody's going to be able to come through was just so incredible, and I'm just so happy that everybody has that same sense of passion that I do for it.
Looks like Marco has typing hands, so he keeps popping up. I'm waiting for him to say something, but I'm not sure if he's saying anything.
No, I mean John hit it on the head. Honestly, the it's funny. I think the second staff meeting, after season one ended, season two, we immediately started prepping out of the gate for it, and I think it was the second staff meeting where the picture came back out where, what is it, the passion, or however much
Oh,
passion we have in staff. Yeah,
the Office meme, that one.
yeah.
Yeah.
It came back. It was meant to. The COD community. I said this before. The term players. We called players last year passion fighters. They knew there wasn't a prize to play for other than the sole title of being season one champions. We want to change that this year, obviously, but it's for that reason that we call everyone passion fighters, and it's also a term used uh, when people are playing at open events through the professional league and they're running through the amateur bracket. And the term also applies to staff, because you will not find as passionate staff in meetings as you sort of will our crew, and that's just not even upper management. That's like all of staff as a whole. You know, we'll come at one another, but it's all to make sure that our direction is aligned, and uh, we're all on the same wavelength, and making sure we're thinking everything through and such, because ultimately all of us want to see this succeed and work out for both the collegiate and the Call of Duty community.
Do you have a good example of where like that passion was just like maybe overwhelming? Because I mean, John, you also mentioned the staff is a family, but working with family or working closely with other people who are very passionate about whatever topic you're working on, there's going to be times where either it's confrontational or it's in the way or that there's problems, but at the same time it also moves everyone forward when you have that level of candor and that level of trust in that everyone is working towards the same thing. Do you have like a good story that kind of matches that positive outcome?
Uh Probably like right before playoffs started. So we were all in a call. We were talking about this is how playoffs are going to go down, right? And everybody was all hands on deck at this point because playoffs were crazy. We had a play-in bracket, so we had that on a Saturday. Then we had the actual playoff bracket on a Sunday, and then more matches throughout the coming week. And we were in the call. And we were talking about people need to do this, and everybody's just so passionate about making sure things happen a certain way. And at the end of the day, maybe a little bit confrontational about like trying to, get the nuts and bolts down. But it ended up, we had an incredible 2 days of streaming. We had 9 hours of stream on Saturday and then an 8-hour stream on that Sunday. We had another person in the community who I'm going to shout out here. His name is Mr. Moves. And when we didn't add the time to stream those matches on the main channel, he'd pick them up on his own channel and he was helping stream them just to make sure that we got all the content out. We had Jared or Heat on the back end, making sure that everybody was in the right place at the right time. We had Drew or Jerusif, as we mentioned a little bit previously, just providing stats for and Marco in the background, updating graphics, updating the playoff bracket, and the entire CCL staff just there to make sure that everybody was in the right place at the right time. And playoffs was probably the smoothest thing I think we've happened the entire year. There was almost no hiccups whatsoever for the entirety of the playoff bracket.
Man, even shout out to Stents during that time as well. That man solo casted, I think one of the loser round games in the losers bracket, and he was solo casting while coughing up blood.
Exactly.
On his own personal channel. Like, that's the kind of passion we have on staff.
Yeah, that man probably should have gone to a hospital, but because he wanted this match to be shown to the community so much, it was a late night match and it was on his own private channel. And I still think he had like 60 people from the community come out to watch it on his own channel. So just the amount of passion the community has and the amount of passion staff has is unparalleled in my opinion.
Yeah, that was just, playoffs was a time. And I mean, we can shout out individual people, but ultimately, like, that does not happen without all of staff being on board.
As
That
a parent,
was so hectic behind the scenes.
I can only imagine. And I'm going to take a quick note. As a parent, if you're coughing up blood, stop streaming and go to the hospital.
Yeah, that might
Good
have not
Lord.
been the most informed opinion of his to just continue streaming like that. I agree, but
I mean, passion, it'll drive you to do some crazy things. And I mean, you hear about like professional sports players playing with like a broken ankle or broken fingers, broken this, broken that, or torn this, torn that. I mean, they're wearing boots and all sorts of things just to hold them together like some sort of Frankenstein monster. But like, come on, coughing up blood, that's your first signal. Let's go, something's wrong. Oh
yeah,
man, that's crazy. But I mean, that is the community though. Like that is esports community. You jump from one game to another, you find those crazy passionate people and they want this collegiately, they want this professionally, they want this to happen. And so when they see that thing that they're extremely passionate about starting off and being small, they latch onto it and they will do everything they can to make it better. And I mean, that's where you guys started. I mean, season 0 to season 1, and now as you're moving into season 2, it sounded like you didn't even get a chance to catch your breath after season 1 ended before you started making plans and talking about season 2. What was that transition like to identify the problems and the growing pains from season 1 that help inform where you're going with season 2?
So in terms of growing pains, I think one of the more challenging one was making sure that everybody was, in the right place at the right time. It was a lot easier during playoffs because everybody knew the set schedule, weeks in advance of what was happening. But there were a lot of times where, players weren't sure exactly, uh, about certain rule sets specifically because the Call of Duty community is a bit weird. Sometimes there's items in the game that people don't feel are best suited for competitive, and so they do what I call a gentleman's agreement, or as commonly referred to as a GA in the community. And some people didn't know that that this was a thing. The CCL doesn't technically enforce that rule set, as we just stick to what the professional rule set is, but just making sure that everybody knows exactly what's happening is a little bit of a growing pain and something that I think we've done a lot better job near the end of the season addressing. But in terms of the transition into this next year, Call of Duty is changing quite drastically. I don't know how familiar you are with it, but recently they announced the Call of Duty is moving to a franchise league system. 7 of the cities have already been announced. I can't name all of them off the top of my head, but Call of Duty's changing, for the better, for the worse, but it's going to probably massively affect how the CCL continues to operate. And honestly, it's really I don't want to say nerve-wracking, but we don't know that much about the next game. We don't really know that much about where franchising is taking Call of Duty. So right now, what we're doing is we're just trying to focus on making the CCL the best it can be with what information we do have.
Yeah, it's players will ask and people from college will ask, well, is it on PC? Is it on PS4? Is it on Xbox? And we have to be, straight up honest. We don't know yet. We really do not know. We're as much in the dark about next year as everyone else is. So when it comes to transitioning and planning for next year, I mean, I think we had 4 different league systems in place, like 4 different variations. Just potentially ready to go ahead and activate on that we've had to sort of flush out and think about in the off chance that it stays on a console or if it's moving to PC with controllers. What happens is the competitive set going to be released when the game launches? It wasn't last year. What will it happen this year because there's a whole franchise league taking place? Um, there's a lot of unknown variables that we don't know about that trying to plan for has just been so hectic. Uh, and then on top of that, it's like all the old things we're used to with the previous game because it's Call of Duty, get a new game every year. So, on top of the league changing at a professional level, the whole entire game structurally is changing at a professional level and across the space. We'll be playing on the next Call of Duty, and we have absolutely no clue what that next Call of Duty is, what competitive game modes there will be, if it's still going to be, 5 players versus 5 players, or if it's going to go back to 4 players versus 4 players. So when teams are asking us like what our team sizes, we'll give them the safe answer of find 5, but we don't know if all 5 are actually gonna be able to compete at the same time yet. So there's so much unknown and in the dark things that we can only supply so many answers. On the bright side, with things transitioning at a professional level, it also means um, we'll likely see a shift both in sort of the amateur and collegiate community because I personally know there's event staff on most of these teams that have been announced. Like the 7 announced have event staff, and when there's event staff, sort of these professional teams and franchises are going to want to put on things for the community, be it collegiate or amateur. So as much as we may see the scene shift, I personally would be shocked if they aren't trying to keep what is sort of the amateur and collegiate community alive and supplying potentially events and such for everyone involved.
Yeah, you have to imagine that with the success of the Overwatch League's teams doing collegiate events, that it's going to match what's going to happen with Call of Duty. And I mean, there may even be some overlapping weekend long events where it's both COD and Overwatch, where it's just this is here's a collegiate LAN. I mean, here's 2 different games owned by the same publisher, and they can be worked on simultaneously because it's 2 different developers, and whatever support comes out can come from the teams. And it doesn't have to be one team over the other, but they could do something in partnership. Like, I could see stuff like that happening for sure.
I am 98% certain we will see LAN events from these franchises be hosted for either the amateur or college community. I'm pretty confident. I wouldn't be shocked if some franchises are already reaching out and trying to organize stuff.
Sounds about right. Now, John, you mentioned being trying to run the league parallel to how the professional league is running, and you
Mhm.
mentioned matching the rules. But how else are you trying to make sure that there is that parallel of transition of here's a collegiate player who knows how to play the same way that a professional does? Like, I know that you're not necessarily going to have franchising set
Mhm.
up, but like with colleges, you kind of have that a little bit already. So how are you kind of managing the behind the scenes and the expectations of teams and matching like how the professional league is or has been managed up to this point?
I think the one thing the CCL does really well is just the basics, right? 95% of staff is like super familiar with Call of Duty. They're familiar with Call of Duty esports, and just that level of knowledge and understanding from the staff makes it a lot easier to rely on them and help the community, to be honest, in making the league what it is. We just playing the same game, playing the same games, right? Making sure that this is what's happening, explaining the rule set to people, because sometimes there's people who come in that don't have a lot of competitive experience with Call of Duty, but they want to play for their college because they play Call of Duty, but maybe not necessarily on the esports side of things. So just coming in, giving people the knowledge of what's happening, and just keeping the same formats as the professional league. The CWL is known for just their double elimination best of 5 tournament style. That's how we ran our playoffs. We ran a play-in. That's what they did recently at the CWL Pro League Finals just 2 weeks ago in Miami. So essentially we run things the same way the CWL or the Call of Duty World League runs their league, just on a collegiate level.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, you have to remember it's still a collegiate league, so as much as we want to mock the professional league entirely, we can't. Professional league only has to deal with 16 players next year, only, or not players, 16 teams next year, only 12. Whereas, last year we had 32, and next year we'll probably have 128 plus, just based off of feedback forms that we're sending out and known contacts and clubs trying to organize teams and such. So, as much as we want to mock things at a professional level, there's also some parts that we can't, like tournament structure will likely be different than the professional league. Rule sets will also, we'll see what happens if we choose to, enforce gentlemen's agreements rules or choose not to. That's a whole debate amongst the community itself at a collegiate level. We should play like the professionals, but we're a college league, so do we have to play like the professionals? It's interesting. But yeah, I think John hit it right on the head.
Yeah, the idea of gentlemen's agreements really strikes me as interesting because it could also come across on some level as like match fixing, just being able to be like, yeah, we're agreeing not to play this map, so you don't have to worry about it in a band pick phase or a mode or anything like that. It's skirting that line, sure, certainly, and flirting with that idea, but at the same time, I kind of like it. It adds a little more flavor to the league. It adds a little more control to the players, and it makes it maybe a little more fun in spirit, and makes it, because I mean we've all been a part of metas where we just don't like one thing about it in one game or another. So being able to avoid that and keep the game fresh and fun for the players and make it entertaining to watch, I think that makes a lot of sense as well. And especially when you're at the collegiate level where you're fighting for glory and notoriety kind of thing within the community. It's not like a huge prize pool kind of thing. You can play around with those house rules a little bit more, I think.
Yeah, and a lot of the time with the gentleman's agreement, it's more so in this game. It's usually a certain specialist, it is GA'd, or a certain weapon is GA'd because it's deemed as too powerful, or it's not very conducive to competitive play, right? For example, there's a burst AR in this game that is a 2 burst, but it kills so quickly compared to the other ARs in the game that the pro players have just decided that it's not worth playing. So we will choose to just make sure it's out of the rule set and uh, keep the rule set the way it is right now. Call of Duty has, in my opinion, a really good meta. There's 2 really good ARs. There's a really good sub, really good sniper, and that's all the meta really needs, in my opinion. And there's sometimes some cheese in games that make it uh, not as conducive to competitive play as everybody would want it to be. And so that's kind of why GAs are a thing, because things are too broken, and we might want to, try to get it out of the rule set and play with, the rule set that the professional players deem as the best and most competitive rule set out there.
And it's for me, like my background being with game development, it's kind of fun to see this iteration come from the community. I have a lot of faith in where mods are coming from and where things like this actually end up making the game better, because like, I mean, for the longest time it was just online lobbies, and then you got matchmaking, and now you have uh, picks and bans coming into more games, especially in ranked play. And now we're getting to that step farther of like not just picking and banning like characters or maps and a lot of shooters. It's now we're getting down to individual weapons or individual specialists like in COD. And so like the more that the community advocates for that kind of stuff, the more you're going to see that shift in game development of more control, more competitive um, definition rule sets and kind of
Hmm.
rules. I mean, it's kind of like tennis where you play on clay, you play on grass, you play on turf, all that kind of stuff. Like those little things that make the arenas more interesting, make the tournaments more interesting. It's going to add more flavor, more personality to what each event means. And so it just makes you
Exactly.
all stand out. Like that's a cool part of seeing this community drive something like this.
Exactly right. And one of the things I think a lot of people are hoping for with the next Call of Duty Modern Warfare releasing in October is just a little bit more fine tunement of the rule set. You know, the professional players, in my opinion, have never really let us down on a good rule set. Even sometimes when the Call of Duty wasn't the most well received, they've somehow always managed to find a rule set to make the game interesting and competitive. And so, with the franchise league going in and a lot more support from the developer, uh, I'm just really thinking that this next game is going to have an incredible rule set, both in the professional level as well as transitioning into the collegiate level.
I have to admit, I'm really curious about how the franchising is going to play out in the professional scene, as well as just how that's going to impact the development of the next game itself. Because I mean, you know that the franchising idea has been stewing and brewing in the background for longer than it's been announced. So to see how that might impact the game's actual fundamental design or balance or how they might take it into consideration is really curious to me. Uh, but I want to keep this more about you guys and what you're doing. Season 2, what can you tell me about it?
It's going to be big. I'll say that.
Oh man.
Laughter and a big statement. This is. I can't wait till you guys can tell me more. I can only assume that all of it's under NDA at this point.
We can say some things. Marco, you want to go for it?
Oh man, season 2. Season 2. Okay. Um, for starters, it's gonna be bigger in the sense that there's gonna be a lot more teams involved. That's for sure. Um, I because there's a lot more teams. The goal is there will be more staff. You know, you see the posts about we want another production crew. You know, we have every intent of putting out as much content as possible next year. Last year we put out stuff on Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays. This year we have plans in place for potentially 5 days. Yeah, we can stay. There's plans to release content over Sunday and Monday as well. I think yeah, over Sunday and Monday as well in the
Hmm.
form of potentially a podcast with players and uh, sort of our own twist on what was an attempted top 10 or top 5 plays last year. Uh, Titles for those have already been sort of established, and they're receiving their own branding right now on the back end because they're things we can work on despite not knowing stuff next year. Um, we just teased Fight Night coming back, which I guess I should briefly explain. Um, the interesting thing about our league compared to other leagues, where it's a college Call of Duty league, but it still very much is a Call of Duty league, right? In all these other leagues, it's very much collegiate first. Where I think this is one of the few leagues that it feels there's sort of still trying to find the balance between Call of Duty and college, and just structurally it's laid out like that. And when I say that, I mean like a lot of us come from the Call of Duty community rather than the collegiate community. So sort of transforming people into the collegiate community is a must. but at the same time, we're always going to interact with the COD community still. And Fight Night last year was one of those events that uh, was open to anybody. It was not just college students. If anybody in the Call of Duty community wants to come and play, they could. Uh, this year, I don't know how Fight Night is, maybe twisted or not, and slightly modified, but Fight Night's definitely coming back. We just teased it, and I think we're announcing it on August 1st that Fight Night should be coming back the August 9th, I think, that Friday.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it'll be. I think it'll all be on BO4, but there's a different sort of. It'll be a different sort of format. John and Shift, who is recently joined management. He was the lead caster all last year. He's fantastic at what he does. He's had the opportunity to go to Call of Duty World League Anaheim and cast the open bracket there. Him and John have sort of discussed how they want to twist Fight Night and change things up and provide airtime to students and players and such. So Fight Night's definitely coming back. And then the big questions that we always get are like how do I register? What's the importance of registering? What do I need to know to register? Um, and sort of intentionally, we haven't put those dates out because October is when the next Call of Duty comes out. But I think the dates to register, I think these are pretty much set. I think is what, November 1st, right?
November 1st is
And
going
it
to be the
closes
start of
January
registration.
1st.
January 1st. Teams will have a 2-month period to sign up for season 2. I think that gives teams a lot of time, those pre-existing teams, as well as people who find out about it after the new game comes out and they maybe saw a stream and they want to get a team started with their college. I think that 2-month period is a good time for them to try to scout out their own team for this season and hopefully get as many colleges as possible. We had 32 teams in season 1, and based on an interest form that we released earlier this week, it's already looking upwards of
96.
96 right now, and we're not even in September or August yet. So
Yeah.
game not so far out.
If you could tell, one of the primary goals of our league is to help build sort of the structure at college programs. It's to get players who want to play in the league integrated with their club, integrated with their collegiate admins, their president, and sort of go through the process of, okay, I want to make a team for the league. I need to recruit. How do I recruit? Can you help me? And then, in a perfect world, the club sort of reaches back out. Yeah, we're going to go ahead and bring you on board. This is how we've done things before. We can provide resources to help you go around campus, put up posters. You should try Reddit. You should try Twitter. You should try Facebook. You should ask your friends if they know anybody. You should get in like the freshman sort of group chats of these colleges coming in, um, and share with one another sort of the intel of recruiting. But it very much is sort of I mean, you see it on Twitter all the time. We're actively asking, if you're going to college XYZ, tweet at us. We'll go ahead and point you in the right direction, and we'll start, if we can find it, your collegiate club. And from there, that's sort of the most we can do on a Twitter level. But behind the scenes right now, I'm looking for the chance to work with Sergio, sort of the captain of Ole Miss, the captain of Oregon, Limitless, and Shaq, a player from Mississippi State, and um, us four are. I think the plan now is tomorrow, actually, at like whatever time at night, is to go ahead and just even put out a video that explains, sort of the process. Okay, this is what you have to do to build a team. This is what you have to do to approach your club. This is what you can go ahead and tell them about. This is sort of the steps we need to take over the next couple uh, over the next 2 months. We need to build a team, and how do we do that? Well, even during that 2 month span, I can't talk about entirely what we're doing, but we plan on again actively helping these players on board and giving colleges and players the opportunity to go ahead and improve during that time frame, um, in the form of some classified things. But it's very much our goal is to very much help structure uh, colleges and incoming players in building building everything out. Because a lot of the people involved that first get reached out to and contacted are from the amateur community, and they know absolutely nothing about collegiate. So it's very important to send them and send them the right direction to their respective clubs and leaders, and sort of be informed when they get the chance to be.
Yeah, I mean, not is it only that each of these game leagues seems to be run differently, but as soon as you start incorporating collegiate, like you have to worry about how that club is structured, if they're a varsity program, how they need to get in contact, how that club is organized, whether or not there's a faculty coordinator, whether it's all just student run, whether that school is actually involved with their program or not. Like it gets messy real fast, and I could see it just being like you don't have enough information on every college in the country basically, so you just have to have that best fit. Here's your templated FAQ answers ready to go, but then have it personalized to where that person's coming from. But that's still an enormous job at communicating that needs to get done, because collegiate is so in the works, I suppose is the right way to put it.
Yeah, I mean you're in the collegiate esports leaders Discord. You see all the questions of the day stuff the same way I do. Uh, it's enjoyable watching everyone's opinions, and it's sort of uh, it's, believe it or not, sort of some of that input has directly affected what we plan on doing, um, when it comes to rule set and such. So
Absolutely. I could absolutely see that. And as we have more conversations around what schools and what games are supporting NACE or supporting whatever league is coming out, whether it's Collegiate Star League or TESPA, and if TESPA's going to start doing Call of Duty stuff, I don't think they've started doing anything like that. But like, how do you guys have your ownership in that as well? Where is the community going to go? Like, it's all sorts of weird and wonky, but you just have to play it day by day. And I mean, when you can give teams 2 months to organize from November to January to say this is what we're going to do, it's got to be a huge relief for you as well to be like, okay, those players and those teams are sorting it out over there. We can come over here and sort this out.
yeah, and I mean community, 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 right? A lot of what we're doing next year is, I mean, it's community influenced. We aren't, as much as we may want to structure things and such, there does come a point where if you don't listen back to the community, you aren't doing, you essentially are cutting off where you started, or the follower base behind you. Uh, so of course, a lot of the decisions next year, are going to have been influenced, or uh, have been talked about based on community feedback. So next year, of course, it also means a shorter season. Um, I think that one, uh, correct me if I'm wrong, John, but I think that one was entirely established, regardless of what like rules and tournament format we go with. Next year definitely has a shorter season.
Absolutely. Last season we had 23 matches over the course of 12 weeks, 2 matches a week, other than the week most schools had spring break, so we only had one that week. But at the end of the day, everybody wants to play COD, but 12 weeks is maybe a little bit overkill. It was a lot of fun in my opinion, but I realized by around week 10 or 11, everybody was kind of getting a little bit tired. So this season we're trying to smooth that out, make it so that there's something to play for,
Hmm.
and that there's always a reason, not only to win, but to win decisively. And so I think right now what we've got cooking up is going to be the best of every world possible for making a good league this season.
And yeah, I mean, players want things. There's a lot that we want to give back to our community, from the correct season structure to, I mean, players know this. They want to land. We want to land as much as they do. We can't say
Mhm.
yes. We cannot say yes yet. Um, but like every player should know, we're trying to make lands happen one way or another. like uh, be it in conjunction with universities or in some other form. You know, everyone's always asking, is there going to be one? Is there going to be one? We can't say yes because nothing. We won't. We ourselves don't know yet. But you know, like the things all the players want in this league for next year and going forward. They're definitely things that we're actively like working towards and want as much as they do, if not more, than.
I mean, that sounds like a tremendous amount of effort to put into that next season. I mean, you're talking about restructuring the season, working towards goals that the community wants, as well as just pushing the limits of what your staff can do in itself. How are you supporting this amount of change and support? I mean, Marco, I know you're going on no sleep, and John, you're wearing on like every hat except for stats. So how do you guys move forward when like if a prize isn't available, how do you support getting another staff member? How do you make sure that everyone understands that the value is there for their input and their participation, especially from the staffing side?
I think I'm going to narrow this down to one word, and we've said it a couple of times, but it's passion. Um, everybody, yeah. I know Mark is gonna laugh at me. I use this word a lot, mostly because it's true. Everybody on staff like genuinely cares about it, and when we're looking for somebody new, you know, there's a little bit of a vetting process. But a lot of the people that get picked up, we've seen throughout the community, we've seen how passionate they are about it, and you know, when we see those things, when we see somebody who's really putting themselves out there and wants to grind, that's when we start taking notice of people and you know bringing them onto staff. It's just one of those things. It's all about the work you put in, because what you put in is what you're going to get out of it, right? And just see people like before they even consider joining the CCL are putting in time and effort to, you know, hone their craft to be the best version of themselves they can be. That's what's very attractive when you want to add somebody to a staff, just that they're willing to put in that time and effort to make themselves the best.
I mean, it's funny. Internally, we talk about it. We'd love to get, we'd love some sort of revenue, but is that a primary goal? It honestly, amongst staff and such, it's not the number one goal. The number one goal, I think universally across all what we do is to just put out a good league and supply to the community. I think that universally is established amongst management and amongst like anyone, any staff member, from somebody who clips to somebody who's helping write up, like flush out the rule set for next year, or setting up tournament structure. Universally, our goal is to literally provide for the players. That's it. That's the number one driving force of what we all want. That's the number one driving force of what sets the league apart. And because that's sort of what uh, that's our main goal and such. We very much are all on the same page when it comes to, okay, this is the next step. We need to make sure this happens. Can we expand resources here? Can we do that? It's insane. I don't know if there's any other league like it, but um, it's why, as much of a league as this is, it's very much a community. I mean, the open event in Anaheim, right? I flew out. I got to meet John in person for the first time. I got to meet Drusuf. I got to meet roughly like 30 other people from the CCL community at a professional event. There were 30 of us from this league last year, all meeting each other at an open event for the first time. Like, as much of a league as this is, I don't know, where else that happens, where I can go and recognize somebody from Ole Miss or Tennessee or Mississippi State or Toronto or whatever the case, where we all uh, see one another, and it's not even like a staff to player relationship. It's legitimately just friends. We were all there at the event enjoying things. We had Shift was on the desk, and he was casting the whole time, and he came and sat with us. I think we had two rows filled at some point in time at the actual event, just watching the games, like the final day. Um, we were even out, this is sort of what unifies us. And then the next event, Miami, recently, I think there was like 14 to 15 different community members all there, uh, all as either players. I think there was 2 or 3 staff there as well. Like, it's insane. It's we may be a league, but we very much are also a community who all just want a good format and uh, something structural and such to play on. And that's really what drives everyone towards all these decisions and such. It's insane.
I've heard two pieces of advice that you've repeated that I've been hearing for, I suppose, years now. One is Amazon's mantra of, does this benefit the customer? Which it sounds very much of what you guys are focused on, is like, whoever's consuming this, are our decisions best suiting these people? Is this what's best for these people, the people who are putting in the most time and effort and trying to consume whatever you guys are putting out? I think that's a brilliant strategy to take, and it's modeled after the most successful company in the world. So why not? It doesn't seem like a bad place to start. But then also that chasing money is not the way. Like, you're not going to be happy chasing it. You're never going to be satisfied, even if you do get it. But more often than not, anyone chasing money never gets it. Like, that's a, I don't know, more a humanitarian kind of perspective. But yeah, I kind of have to agree with that. It's like, if you guys are going to put in the time and the effort, and then the community adopts it, maybe you get paid back for it. Maybe. But that's not the ultimate goal. That's not the ultimate motivation to do what you guys do. And I mean, just as someone who's commenting on collegiate esports broadly and trying to understand more about the organizations within them, the schools within them, the players, and now starting some of the businesses who are trying to get in on esports, let alone collegiate esports, like, that's how you do it. You have to do it through community and patience and building it up right.
Yeah, the the key the key words there at the end was building it up right. Because we're college, but we're also Call of Duty, and uh, because we're Call of Duty, there's a lot in the Call of Duty community. But if we do things, we want to make sure things are done right. We want to make sure that as much as I have people on Twitter right now tweeting at me, we want to land and such. When we do it, we want it done right. You know, uh, that's just how it is. I think a really good example of this actually was um, merchandise last year. We managed to drop merchandise in the form of Fight Night stuff last year, but I think we're unsatisfied internally um, with sort of the time frame that we took for it and actually looking at the resources and such. And we're restructuring the way we approach it next year. So I think it's also a goal of ours to make sure that everything that progressively happens within the league is done right. What's the right way of introducing members into the community? What's the right way to uh, prepare for something like a land? Right? What's the right way to um, what's the right way to work with people? It is something that we all think about, and it's also a value.
I think one way that I've been looking at this, and one thing that it seems like a lot of people have talked about, especially with the international coming up, is crowdfunding goals, crowdfunding things that are beneficial for communities. I'm kind of surprised to hear that not more groups have done that. There's some people, some communities that run Patreons, and those seem to do well enough. But honestly, I'm just kind of surprised that that hasn't been more of a conversation for driving value for the consumers of whatever league or team that is going on. But I absolutely agree. You try one strategy, it's not what you wanted. It's not, maybe not the return that you wanted, or maybe it's just not the feedback that you wanted. And so try again. And building it right, like you mentioned, is really important. So it'll be fun to see your guys' iteration on that process, especially as it as you start talking community and money and wanting some sort of impact or something to give back to the community that way, it's going to be a delicate balance for sure.
Yeah, it's all a process. It's one thing at a time. It's making sure everything gets established. It's making sure things are done right. Um, you can't rush it. But
Exactly.
I mean, like even things like crowdfunding, man, the amount of discussions that we've had for next season between content timeline, league timeline, et cetera. Like there is so much that, in a way, we haven't even begun to discuss because there just hasn't been time because there's so many other things that we're actively working on.
Yeah.
It is insane how much we want to provide next season.
And Marco really hit it on the head, right? There's so many things we want to do, but at the end of the day, if we don't do it right, it's just not worth doing at all. And so we're taking our time, making sure we get everything done, making sure we're tightening all the bolts down, everything's in its place, ready to go for when the season rolls around, when the new game drops, and just making sure we're on top of our game. Call of Duty have to adapt so much, not only in game, but with a new game coming out every year, especially with franchise coming out. It's just all the little things we're trying to get right to make the bigger picture that much better. And so far, I think we're on the right path, but still a long ways to go.
I'm looking at our internal timeline, and there's what 36 different items, 36 different key dates before season starts. 36 different key dates we have internally that, in some way, shape, or form, will impact next season. And I think this internal timeline is without three other projects. I mean, that's between now and like January. We'll call it January 1st right now, since that's the known date when registration will close. Um, yeah, it's absolutely insane how much we're trying to do in that time frame and how much we think we already can do right. And it's mental to think that there's so much more that we can also do potentially.
Now,
You know,
as a personal question, just because I like organizing and I mean I love tracking data and all that kind of stuff. What are your most valuable organization tools that you all have that help you work together like this? I mean, you mentioned 30 people working separately, and yet you guys can organize 30 some key dates, hundreds of players, teams, communities, content pipelines. How do you track all that?
So I'd say there's three things. We have a shared Google Drive with Google Calendar that we all use, a Trello board, and then Discord. I know Discord sometimes receives a little bit of flack, but honestly, Discord is probably the main tool we use. Just it's so easy. Everybody's always online. We can message somebody if we need something, and they're usually pretty good at responding right away. But Discord is, I'd say, by far and away, probably our most useful tool.
yeah. I mean, it's the fact that everyone's active on Discord is nice as well. Immediate reactions and such to problems or to suggestions is key, and Discord provides that. Um, and then also, I'm gonna take it. I'm gonna take. It's also staying organized internally. It's not even just a actual tool like Google Drive or Trello or whatever the case. It comes down to being so organized internally. Like the first thing we did, season one ends. Immediately thoughts for season two begin. Was say our drive looks awful. It was a mess by the end, and we flat created a complete new team drive. We're still in the process of bringing over some of last year's stuff, so we can easily navigate to things like last year's stats, last year's results, and such. But I mean, everything from internally, the Discord, to like the Trello to the Google Drive, what all three of those have in common is they're all tools to be organized. But as of right now, they are all organized because it's very easy for any of those to look, pretty much like a college dorm room where everything is all over the place. Right now, they all very much are clean and easy to identify what the next goal is, what the next deadline is, where I need to go to get feedback feedback for design or where I need to go to get feedback about social media or casting for next year, whatever the case, it's because everything is so, upkept, kept tidy is what I'm looking for, that we're able to just continually activate and push forward on everything.
I love it when a group comes together and holds each other accountable for organizing and keeping the plan together. Because I mean, like you said, it can look like a college dorm room, and you can't get anything done until you know where something's at, and you can't find it when it's buried. Well,
Indeed.
yeah, so I mean that's a great way to wrap up for me. I'm super stoked to hear the tools that you all are using. I'm very much on board with a lot of those things and have seen those used to great success. So, uh, sounds like you all have your plans very well laid, and I'm excited to see what happens next going forward with College COD. Sorry. Um, but as we wrap up, I'd like to give you guys a chance to do some more shout outs to the community, to your coworkers, to whatever else you're working on. Let us know what you've got going on and where people can reach out to you.
So first, I want to give a big shout out to the entirety of the community. They've been so supportive throughout the entirety of season 0 through season 1, and just the nonstop questions. I love it. I love getting to answer the questions every day. I love hearing everybody that's super passionate about what we're doing and what's coming up for the future. So just a big shout out to them. There's people always playing pickup games in the community. They're always ready to play more COD. It doesn't even matter what COD it is half the time. They're just down to play. They want to be competitive. And sometimes the friendships they've made in the CCL, transcend their school. We've had players, come together and play with each other at a major event like at CWL Anaheim. And so just a big shout out to the community. Second shout out to the rest of the staff, people I didn't necessarily name drop. You all know who you are. You've put in so much work for season 0 and season 1, and season 2 is only going to be bigger and better. And I'm just so blessed to be able to work with such talented individuals who are as passionate about it as I am. Marco's included in that as well. I've never met a man with more passion than Marco. So got to give him a big shout out. And thank you for allowing us to be on this podcast today. CollegeCOD sign-up's going to be starting November 1st, season starting in January. And follow us on Twitter at CollegeCOD for more updates. Join the Discord and collegecod.com.
Yeah, shout out to the people who got this off the ground as well. It's always important going forward to work with people, with other staff and the community and such. But ultimately, the position we're in is because of a Reddit post. So shout out to everyone who joined and began this from a simple Reddit post, and everyone who is responsible for, structuring season 0, the unwritten piece, or like the unknown part of history of the league, the testing grounds, back when it was like eight teams and like 6 pickup teams across maybe a total of 23 or 24 different universities. I mean, when you start a league, you usually start, full throttle, and instead, the CCL is different. We started basically as, pickup games and a pickup league, and from there, it's become what it is now because of the community. So shout out to everyone who actually, founded and began uh, what what this is now. And yes, it's I don't even have to uh, I don't even have to, like, this should go without saying. In some way, shape, or form, in one of these projects, the goal is to make sure to either identify or highlight the people from season 0 and season 1, some of the veterans who have been around and are largely responsible for influencing the community, or uh, a part of those people who sort of kick things off. In some way, shape, or form, we want to be able to recognize you. It's a project. It's not one that we can actually activate on as things are going forward right now, but there are plans for something like that to make sure that we give back to the people who are largely responsible to where we are today. And then on a personal shout out note, shout out to, ironically, the sort of the internship I'm under right now. Actually, the Pittsburgh Knights. They probably don't realize how much I've had to mature or have greatly been influenced by the people I work with in the office and such. I mean, I had this conversation with somebody yesterday. It's insane how much, uh, it's insane how identifiable experiences, difference in experiences, and what comes with experience when it comes to anything esports, anything from management to running a club to being the head of a team, whatever the case. The opportunities and the ability to actually work at a professional level for things like events and social media and the business model, just everything. Like how much I've learned and such, and the importance of always finding people who are better at uh, what you think you can do, i.e., Ron, like Ron, who's a much better designer, or Vix, who's, oh my goodness, one of the most talented videographers in the scene, um, within like, CCL, yes, but like within the whole entire esports scene as a whole, or like John, who is probably the most dedicated producer you will ever see, or Drew and Heat internally taking care of things, Drew with stats and Heat with sort of player management, keeping everyone on task. I mean, Buckles with Reddit and Shift with casting. It's insane to be able to get the chance to uh, work with people who are beyond proficient in what they specialize in. So shout out to the Knights for being able to show me these sort of things, and shout out to the rest of like management and staff as well for just actively always going forward and wanting to push things for next year.
There you go. That's a hell of a sign off, guys. Well, thank you for coming out and talking about CollegeCOD with me and talking about your experiences and where things are going. I really appreciate it. It's another avenue that I can educate myself farther on with CollegeCOD, and I look forward to seeing what's going on and how you guys grow this season. Congrats on season 1, and I hope we stay in touch.
Sure thing.
Thank you so much for having us.
Of course. And that's a wrap on the stream. So thanks to everyone who came out and watched, either on Mixer or Twitch or YouTube or Periscope, all of the places. I appreciate you tuning in. I see you on there. I didn't see any chat, but that's okay. You might have been on Periscope. And that's it for this week. And this episode will probably go out in a couple weeks. Look forward to part 1 of a podcast that I did with members from a number of different schools where we talk about longevity and other problems that college clubs have faced. And part 2 will be out shortly after that. And then we have this podcast. So look forward to all those episodes coming up. And thanks for joining us. Later, everybody. Da, 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 da.